This is the lesson for Monday, the 20th of September 2021 for European history. And what we have done so far is concluding our, at least visuals on the Black Death. We have seen the Monty Python clip, Bring Out Your Dead. We also, as bonus scenes, got to see the anarcho-syndicalist commune and the She's a Witch. We saw a clip from Metropolis showing a cathedral with the 7 deadly sins personified, and death again coming for a man who's having a fever dream. And we saw the Monty Python clip, I Am Death, with the dreaded salmon moose. I showed some images of the Grim Reaper. What I did not show long was, I'll go on. The Grim Reaper is a personification of the implacability of death. Thanatos, it's called. If we had more time, I would show you an excerpt or two from the movie The Seventh Seal, which is a movie made in Sweden in the 1950s, where a knight at the time of the Black Death tries challenging death to a game of chess for fate. I did not show you for too long a picture of a plague doctor. Plague doctors were a distinctive garb of robes and a hat and a beaked hood mask. Now, can anyone guess why they would wear a beaked hood mask as plague doctors? Sir?
They would put a whole arrangement of flowers in to keep the smell of death out.
Yeah. Rather than breathe the cadaverous smell of human decay, which is awful, I mean horrible. I mean, we are programmed instinctively not to want to have anything to do with that. The doctors breathe through in effect, what is a filter, and that filter has herbs and spices and flowers and other scented things, fragrant things, so that the doctor can bear it. It doesn't completely solve the problem, but it makes things better. It also lets you know who you're dealing with. You're dealing with a plague doctor. Why? Because death came to every community, pretty much every family. In fact, in some cases, entire communities and families were wiped out. So, in despair, you have the rise of the flagellants, who view the plague as a curse of God on a sinful humanity. What does God have to do for us? He sent his only begotten Son to die for our sins. And he does so. And we still sin? An angry God needs to be appeased. So the flagellants beat themselves, mortifying their flesh with whips or chains or knotted ropes or whatever, or with sticks to punish sinful flesh. Sinful flesh has its wants, and sometimes the human soul, human mind, doesn't resist it as it should. As such, the difficulty comes from the flesh, so we make the flesh suffer. Or, the Black Death comes from earthquakes. Earthquakes that release a poisonous gas from the bowels of hell that plague us, in which case there's not much we can do about it. Or the Black Death comes from Jews. Jews, dirty Jews, who poison the wells in order to make the Christians suffer for some purpose. Or it comes from evil witches in league with Satan, Satan's concubines, who cast spells on the good people of the world. So the way you fight, or the way you try to take hold desperately of control, not that we'd ever do that now, masks and vaccines, the way that medieval people tried to take control of a situation that's completely out of control. Some became flagellants, others became devout pilgrims, others waged pogroms, officially sanctioned anti-Jewish riots against the Jews. Pogrom, P-O-G-R-O-M, is a vocab term. And some people killed witches, burned them at the stake. Massive numbers of witches burned at the stake, or people accused anyway. But it's not simply enough to kill the witches, is it? One must also kill their allies, their demonic animal familiars, which are 3, 2, 1.
Ducks.
Cats. As such, there's an irony, because science now tells us that the Black Death, bubonic plague, and others was carried on the fleas of rats, which were everywhere in European cities. And except for the little proto-wiener dogs, the little dachshunds, the only protection Europeans had against rats were the very cats that they were killing. Go figure. Panicky people make stupid choices. So, what are the effects of the Black Death on things beyond art? Well, economically, let's look at the value of labor. Before the Black Death, population was high. On a limited amount of land, what that meant was that population, high population, meant that there were only so many jobs, and there were other people who could fill them. So the value of skilled trades, the value of semi-skilled crafts, even the value of farm labor was very low, because there were so many people who were desperate for work. But after the Black Death, so many people died that you end up with a shortage of skilled, a shortage of skilled labor. So that suddenly the carpenter or the blacksmith or the plumber or whoever is in the driver's seat. And if he doesn't like how he's being paid or the working conditions, he'll leave and go somewhere where he's appreciated. Now, oddly enough, because of the Wuhan flu, we have a similar situation today. And it's not because so many people have died. It's because of two things. In this area, you may have heard adults in your world talking about how hard it is for restaurants to find help or for other businesses to find help. And one of the things that people around here say is, well, our housing prices are just so high that working people can't afford to live within easy driving distance of their jobs anymore. And that's something that will require more low-income housing. Now, there may be truth to that, maybe. But also, there's this. From the beginning of the Wuhan flu pandemic, President Trump approved a series of emergency measures that were passed by Congress that gave aid to people. For example, they weren't allowed to be evicted from their homes, even if they didn't pay their rent. For example, an extension of unemployment benefits, an extension of various social welfare programs designed to pay people who couldn't work because we closed the economy down. And some of these programs have only just ended or are still going on. There are parts of the country that do not have our housing problem, that still have problems getting people to work at McDonald's or Wendy's. One of the reasons for that is so long as these extra welfare programs, these emergency measures that pay unproductive people to be unproductive, continue, a whole bunch of people who could work won't, because they make just as much money or almost as much money sitting at home as they would if they were going to work. That distorts the economy. It's a problem that we face. And it takes a politician with guts or conservatism or whatever to say we've got to stop these programs now and get people back to work. And not everyone has the vision, courage, or even the idea that that's a right thing to do that. After the Black Death, workers, craftsmen had, at least for a little while, a really much better time negotiating because their labor was so valuable. The second thing is this. See the rough rectangle made by my floor pad? If that rectangle represents the wealth of Europe, all of the real estate and the silver and the gold and the gems, all of the assets, all of the wealth, the material wealth of Europe before the Black Death, what do you think happens to that after the Black Death? Does the rectangle get bigger? In other words, does wealth expand during the Black Death? Does it get smaller? Does wealth shrink during the Black Death? Does it remain about the same? What happens to the wealth of Europe during the time of the Black Death? Sir?
I would think that it'd be more wealthy.
Why?
Because there's less people having valuable things, so that leaves for more people to be more wealthy.
Okay, in a relative sense, since there are fewer people, the amount of wealth that is available to be taken by each person would increase. But I'm talking about the overall amount of wealth, independent of population. Does the wealth of Europe significantly change as a result of the Black Death? Good answer.
I believe it does significantly change, but in the opposite ways Jack said.
Go on.
Sort of I guess I'm trying to find like a way to explain this.
If you want, find an example. I will call on you next.
Yeah.
So you think that the wealth would shrink?
Yeah.
Because of burning buildings and...
Yeah, like less valuables, and I feel like the value would go down or such, or...
Because there's more gold available, the value of each gold piece goes down.
Yes.
Actually, there's some truth in what she says. There's some truth in what you both said.
I think it would decrease because there'd be less people to make valuable things.
In terms of wealth production, you're right. There's fewer things being made, so ongoing wealth creation is going to go down at least for a little while. Okay, I will tell you, the objective wealth of Europe doesn't really change very much. Yes, there is some destruction, but not enough to fundamentally change. Maybe to get rid of the yellow sections and just keep the black sections. Yes, each person that's left alive has a chance at a greater proportion of the wealth. The amount of wealth in Europe stays basically the same. But with fewer people, if you look at it as a ratio, since there are so many fewer people for the same amount of wealth, each individual gets a chance to gain more. So that's the spirit of what you're saying. What that does is it jumpstarts the economy. It's like having some lighter fluid at a barbecue, and instead of doing the safe thing, which is to put it on before you light it, you like shoot it. So there's a stream and it stops and then it hits the fire and it goes whoosh. It jumpstarts the economy. The Black Death actually creates more fluid wealth per survivor just because there are so few people compared to the amount of wealth. Suddenly people have spending money. And that's going to boost purchases of silks and spices. Any questions? Okay, we're about done with the Black Death. We're going to conclude with the Middle Ages tomorrow. And God willing, we'll begin Renaissance Wednesday. Thank you for your attention. And we're done.